Thank you, everybody, so much. This is Deb Levine from ISIS, and very, very excited about our webinar speaker today, Evan Balin. And I want to start by saying thank you so much to Camino PR for providing all the technology and the RSVPs and co-hosting with us today. And from ISIS on the call, we have myself and also David Begor, who is our Senior Product Manager, and he is based up in Portland, Oregon right now. So we would like to welcome Evan Balin from First Page Sage. He is an incredible person, so I'm going to say that to start with. You've probably seen his bio. He's best known as a search engine optimization expert, and he has used his ability to rank at the top of Google to build and sell 5 businesses, including one of the largest children's websites online. He has out of really a commitment to our communities and social good, Evan has gotten involved with a lot of nonprofit organizations offering the services that he has provided for corporate marketing for social good. And it is, I feel, if I'm hesitating, it's because I feel so lucky to have met Evan and to be able to share him with and his expertise with the Ford Grantee Group. He really he understands SEO in a way that really is it's beyond magical thinking. It's effective, and it can really help improve, I think, all of our visibilities as organizations, and hopefully affecting sexual health and rights for youth across the country. So with that, the way we'll go today is that Evan will be giving a presentation and sort of explaining the overview of how he looks at and works with SEO. Serious SEO strategies and what we need to know. The folks at SECUS have generously offered that we can use their website, and so Evan will be doing kind of a live case study with the SECUS website. And then actually Evan is available for questions at any time during the presentation, as well as after the presentation. If people are interested and they like what they see, that he's, the tips and advice he's provided around the SECUS website, he is available for another hour through the Ready Talk conference to help with one-on-one with your websites. So, so I'm taking a cue, and you can do that via the chat mechanism in Ready Talk. And at any time during the conference, again, you can raise your hand, or you can chat to the presenters, and we will take your questions and get them to Evan to answer. So without further ado, Evan Balin, the podium is yours.
Thank you so much, Deb. It's an honor to be here. I always love the opportunity to kind of help out and educate people in the nonprofit space. Again, it's just really a pleasure to be here. And just so everybody knows, it's such an interesting platform, a webinar. It's a great way for everybody to get together really quickly and get all kinds of great information, but we're missing the face-to-face part of it. So one thing that I like to do is welcome people to virtually raise your hand. There should be a raise hand button that you have right in front of you on Ready Talk. And at any point, feel free to interrupt me. If I say something and you just want more clarification, or you have a question specifically about your organization, I'm a fan of just the kind of interruption model of this presentation, where just you have something to say, just go right ahead, and I'm happy to answer it. And Deb, how are we going to handle that? Were we going to unmute people at that point, or were they going to chat it? What was easiest?
I believe that everybody's unmuted. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Everybody's
Okay.
unmuted. So basically, if you raise your hand, then I will call on you, and then you can just type or voice your question, or you can type at any time and type to chat to the presenters, and then we will see your question, and we'll just take them in order. You know, we've just asked Evan to finish his thought before we pass on the questions.
Absolutely. Okay. So, welcome to Serious SEO Strategies, what nonprofits need to know. I always think that a background of who is talking to you is important, but I feel like you guys have already gotten quite a bit of that because of Deb's kind words just now, and you have my bio. But just briefly, as you know, I'm an entrepreneur, and that's kind of the way I think of myself first and foremost in terms of what I do during the day. I write quite a bit as well. I've got 2 books out and a 3rd book coming out soon. I've got Outsmarting Google and Outsmarting Social Media. Outsmarting Google 2 is the one that I'm working on now. And the most important thing about me is that I'm a member of my community here in San Francisco, and I like to think in a larger sense as well. I've got the Evan Bailyn Foundation, which benefits causes related to emotional awareness. That is something that is extremely important to me, is the idea of both kids and adults being able to understand their feelings better, just understanding the full spectrum of their emotions. And I think it allows people to be more human, to deal with issues, and to allow their lives to sort of proceed in a mature and healthy way rather than reacting to older childhood situations. I think that if more people did that, or were educated enough in that area, that the world would be a better place on many levels. I also produce a women's empowerment conference every year with a close friend of mine who is a woman, and that's called Women Rocket. So that's a bit about me, and now we can go right into the presentation. So here's my really oversimplified view of the ultimate online marketing formula for nonprofits. But I think it's important to just break things down and just look at it very clearly, because I'm going to be referring back to this later in the presentation. So you have a traffic source in the first place. If you want to get traffic to your website, it needs to come from somewhere. That traffic source can be a website that you're featured on, your nonprofit is featured on or advertised on, or it could be just Google search results, or it could be Facebook or Twitter or Pinterest or any of myriad sources. Now, getting the traffic to your website, there's a particular art to that, and it's you could call it click conversion. That's what I like to call it. It is the art of making sure that you're putting something out there that is interesting enough on other websites so that people end up coming to your website. And that's very important if you want to have a good amount of traffic, which will eventually lead to the goal of having your website. And the goal is, in many cases, I think for many of the grantees here today, is to convert that web traffic, that theoretical people crawling around on the website, to donors or to volunteers or perhaps some sort of sponsorship. There's a couple of different things, but I think donations are usually the ones that are focused on the most. And so once you've converted somebody to a donor from just a person walking around on the website, you have done something very important, which I consider, again, a blend between an art and a science. And we usually call that conversion optimization. And here I'm just calling it donor or volunteer conversion. And there's so much to that that really has to do with the way your website looks, how big the donate button or donate section tab is, videos that are emotionally compelling. I'm going to be getting into that a little bit later in the talk. But both types of conversion, the part between the traffic source and the website, which is getting people to the website, and the part between the website and people wanting to donate or volunteer, are extremely important. So with that framework in mind, and Deb is just mentioning that in addition to donations and volunteers, it's also engaging supporters, which is a very valuable thing as well. So when we talk about the conversion optimization, we're also talking about people feeling like an engaged part of this mission that we have. So now, everything starts with traffic, as you saw. That's the leftmost part of the diagram in the last screen. So how do we get that traffic to your website? Okay, this is probably the most basic part of online marketing. this is the way I think of it. I think of it as you can either push the traffic there or pull the traffic there. Now, the image of pushing traffic is the way I think of advertising in a lot of forms of marketing as well, which is people feel sort of compelled because they see an advertisement many times, or people will say, you must go to this, that sort of thing. And you click on it because you're being compelled in some way. Then there's the pull strategy, which is people are so interested in the content that you're putting out. And it could be people or it could be search engines are so interested that people just end up on your website without even thinking about it too much. And I'm a fan of this because I think of it as kind of like an online version of charisma. The same thing that would attract one human being to another human being. That same principle is in action when you are pulling traffic to your website. It is a sort of charisma. And that has really been the secret to how I have been able to get so much traffic to important web properties over the years, both my own and my clients, has been through this sort of online charisma. That's how I like to describe it. And I have a strategy for pulling traffic to a website, and I call that strategy the nuclear football. The reason I call the strategy the nuclear football is just because I was having a conversation with a friend one time, and he was just saying it's such a powerful strategy, and he was just joking, and he called it this really exaggerated, crazy-sounding name. So it's just a funny term I use. There's nothing really to it. But this is, to me, the greatest online marketing strategy that I have ever seen or engaged with, and I have really tried a lot of different things with my own properties and with clients. So what do I mean when I say the nuclear football? What is this strategy if we're really to condense it? Well, it really is two things. It's great content. Now, when I say content, I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about, but just to be clear, content is anything you put on your website or another website. Content would be something like an article. That's usually the most common form. Content would be a video. It would be an infographic, a series of images, whatever it is. So just want to be super clear. Now, when you have great content and then other people, other websites acknowledge this content, then you also have links, press, and exposure. And so these two things, when you combine them, good content and then links and recognition from other websites, are a really magical thing. And what I love about this strategy is it is timeless. This strategy worked for a business or for a nonprofit before the Internet ever existed. And the reason I say that is because when you do something that you really care about, and I think everyone here will be able to relate to this because of the crowd that we have, when you do something you really care about, that you're really passionate about, and you're good at vocalizing and telling other people, or at least other people are telling other people about what you're doing, you're usually going to get a lot of momentum and exposure from that. It's sort of just something that just keeps on driving. It's like creating a driving force, something great, and then lots of buzz about it. That's what the nuclear football is about, except in this case it has actually become codified within Google's algorithm. That's how wise Larry and Sergey, the founders of Google, really were when they created this research paper at Stanford that put Google, that gave birth to Google really, is they knew that if other people are recognizing content, and they would only do this if your content is really good on your website, that it deserves to be publicized by Google, that it deserves to show up at the top of the search results. So this is practically speaking how that kind of vague formula comes into action. So the nuclear football works like this when you break it down just one level further. You create really fabulous content within your niche. I believe everybody here is in the nonprofit niche of sexual health. Depending on what angle you take, this is going to be your niche. So creating content that is really interesting to people. And when I say people, I mean anyone that you would want to come to your website. You shouldn't just create content that's interesting that has nothing to do with your website, because then you won't get the right people. And I'm going to get into that in a minute, but it can be tempting to create content that gets a lot of traffic to your website. But traffic of the wrong type is pretty much useless. So it's very important that you create targeted but fabulous niche content. Now, Once you have created great content, you need to tell people about it. Just like in life, if you did something good, other people should know about it, and that's how it's going to get the recognition that it deserves. Not if you're kind of a saint about it and nobody knows. You know, it's very important in the online world, if you're looking for a result, that others know about it. And I've seen some of the best functioning nonprofits that I have seen, and the best businesses that I've seen, are run by people who are good at sending out a lot of emails every day, to kind of put it very bluntly. People that are constantly writing to reporters or the owners of big websites or blogs and saying, you know, we're doing this new initiative. We're really excited about it. If you could, you know, find it in your heart to share this with your audience, or if you find it interesting enough to share it, we'd love that. Send out enough emails like that every day, and you're going to see some real traction around what you're doing. And hopefully what you're doing is compelling enough in the first place that you're going to be getting the results that you want, the conversion, whether it's to an engaged supporter, a volunteer, a donor, or a sponsorship. So this whole process, again, I was talking about how it got codified into Google's algorithm. Google loves this. When they see other people, meaning other websites, talking about what you're doing, and by that I mean linking, placing a hypertext link. A link is, I think everybody knows this, but anything that brings someone from one website to another website when they click on it. Could be an image, could be text. When you link to another website, you are essentially voting for that website as if you were placing a vote in an election. And that's the way Google works. Google treats their search results sort of like the results of an election. The number one result has been elected there because a lot of other websites have linked to it. Now, they've linked to it for a particular reason. That's why it responds to a very specific search that someone types into the search box. So it's not as simple as if you have a lot of links, you're going to show up high for every search term. It's very important that you specify what your page is about. But I'm going to get into that in 1 minute. I see we have a question. Deb is passing on the question. Do the links work from email newsletters as well as from other websites when I'm talking about the value of links? So the answer is no, not in the case of Google. Google is not always able to see email newsletters. I would say right now they don't really have the technology to do that. They can't go into your private email newsletter and see it, even if it is on Gmail. That's kind of a wall that they don't want to go across. So if you're linking to something that you really like within an email newsletter, that's wonderful for actually getting exposure, but it is not going to help with Google's algorithm. And it's the same case with a lot of social media. A lot of social media sites, because you have to log in and because your privacy is important, you're not going to get credit from Google as if it's a vote. If you post a link on, let's say, your private Facebook page. If you post it on a public page, you may get that link's value. But that's an important thing to note, is that to get this link to count as a vote from another website, pointing to your website, to give you credit for that, it needs to just be standing on a public website, which almost every website is this way unless it's a password-protected area, which happens to be the case for most social networks. But I wouldn't even worry too much about the social media, despite what I just told you, because Google has been working for a good 3 years really, really hard to make sure that it can measure the value of all of this social sharing we do. When we talk about a nonprofit that we love or any sort of website that we find valuable or interesting on Facebook, on Twitter, on Pinterest, whatever our social network is, Google really does want to be able to measure social value, and it's been working really hard to do that. It's been stymied a little bit by Facebook and Twitter. They don't really want to be friends with Google in the same way Google wants to be friends with them because of money-related issues. But you can believe that in the very near future, your social sharing will get credibility like a vote in the same way that a link on a blog or a website gets credibility as a vote in Google's eyes. Google Plus, by the way, that social sharing does count. That is the one exception to the current situation that we have where a link on a social network doesn't count at the present time. In Google Plus it does because Google owns the property. Okay, so that's a bit of a tangent. David is asking about Tumblr. I believe Tumblr votes are not counting right now, and the reason I say that is because almost every social network has kind of sat down with Google and made an agreement that because it's all user-controlled content on those social networks, they're going to place what's known as a no-follow tag on every single link that goes out. Because I could just create a Facebook, a Tumblr, a Twitter, and 10 other social networks, and then give myself like 10, 12 links right there. I could link to my own website. Google is trying to prevent links from being created for commercial benefit or even for the benefit of a nonprofit organization. And David, I'll be with you in just a second, or excuse me, Ryan, I'll be with you in a second. So they have instituted this thing called a no-follow tag that any big social network will have. They will have a no-follow tag on all outbound links. So if you link from your Tumblr, I'm pretty sure Tumblr has a no-follow tag, because I know LinkedIn does. I know Wikipedia does even, because it's edited by people. So again, there's so many rules about how votes can and can't count. Almost always they're not going to count if it's too easy. You have to earn that link by being covered in a blog or by being featured on a website. So hopefully that answers your question, David. Ryan, you said, can you talk more about the benefits of Google+? And by the way, I'm sorry, Ryan, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, because I see there's two N's, so forgive me in advance. Can you talk more about the benefits of Google+ for an organization? Okay, so I don't want to get too far into this, but I want to make sure I address your question. The benefits of Google+ are basically that Google is looking for a way to change their search results right now. It is very important to them that they can measure social equity. They want to know if you're looking for a restaurant, for instance, or even a place to give end-of-year donations. What do your friends think about that? There are certain things that we would trust our friends' opinions about, restaurants, books, movies, that sort of thing. Certain things we may not trust our friends' opinions on, or we would only trust certain friends' opinions on. So Google is working on a hybrid version of their search results, which they have right now, but normally you don't notice it that much because it's very, very early in the process. They haven't gotten very good at what's known as social search. But the early work they have done can all be seen in Google+. And basically what that means is that if your organization is in a lot of other people or other business pages' circles, meaning if other people have clicked the button that says, add this organization to my circles, then all those people, and possibly even friends of theirs down the road, are going to get slightly different search results if they're looking for something related to your organization. So if somebody types in sexual health tips for teens, for instance, and you are in their Google+ circles, your organization is in their circles, they're going to get a slightly different search result that indicates that you have basically become a fan of theirs in a way. You're connected to them, and you're more likely to want to see something put out by somebody that's within your circles. So there is some social influence. So the takeaway, the practical takeaway, is that you want as many other people to put your organization into their circles as possible, and to click the +1 button in the search results about your organization. In reality, not many people do these things right now. It's just so early on. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, but if you are generally maintaining a Google+ page and putting out the same updates that you would put out for LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, you're going to be in good shape. So I wouldn't think too hard about it, because honestly you guys are so busy. You have so much to think about right now. Google+ is the only social network that influences Google search results right now, but in the very near future that won't be the case, and I don't want you guys to be focusing too much on this. And then it looks like there's a follow-up that says, can we connect this with other social media tools like Facebook and Twitter? I'm trying to make sure I know exactly what you mean. It looks like Deb is responding.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, Evan, I kind of jumped in on that one, and I think it's a matter of understanding. So what Evan is specifically talking about is how to get your organizational website towards the top of the search rankings in Google. So right now, I did actually in Camino's weekly update that they send out, I wrote a blog posting, which is basically if I search for how do you have sex, our sites don't come up. So Planned Parenthood online, sex, etc., they do not come up in the top of the search listings. So ultimately what Evan's talking about is what do we need to do so that when people are searching for sexual health and rights, various terms, advocacy, when they want to get involved with our organizations, how do we make sure when they go to Google as a search engine that they get to our fabulous organizations? And then once they get to our fabulous organizations, then your website ideally is having links so that they can that our supporters can then join our Facebook and our Twitter accounts and follow us and become engaged supporters of our organizations. So I hope that helps, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Deb. Actually, that was extremely well put. I appreciate you jumping in there. So yeah, I agree with that completely. It's really helpful to get people on your social networks after they already know that you exist. And people who have donated, you'll get them to donate again. People that are supporters, they'll continue to be supporters and continue to get updates through social media. I think of social media as a way of maintaining relationships. A bit more than I do think of it as a way of getting new relationships. It's true that can happen and does happen, but I really think social media is more valuable for maintaining relationships and sort of continuing to get value from them. And search engine optimization is the best way to create new relationships. Now there's a lot of caveats in that statement, but I like to kind of think of it that way.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. So to finish off this formula, so Google loves these links, and they're starting to love social sharing as well. When you get a lot of links from other websites because you've created cool content that people are linking to, then your site begins to skyrocket for thousands of what's known as long-tail keywords. I'm sure some of you know what that means, but I want to explain it because there's absolutely always a good part of the audience that doesn't know what I mean when I say long-tail. As it applies to search engines, the long-tail theory basically states that it is better to show up for lots of little keywords than a couple of big keywords. So meaning if somebody types in, how do you have sex? That is a long-tail keyword because there's a lot of words in it and maybe not that many people type it in. In this case, maybe a good amount of people do. But if somebody types in best sex practices as evidenced in a study in 2012, study or something crazy like that. They are typing in something that probably only they are typing in. There's very likely not many searches like that. But if you can get that search to your website and somebody who types it in lands on your website, and you can also get thousands of other searches that are similar, that are just only a few people are typing them in per month. They're not the same as someone typing in sexual health or sexual advocacy or something like that. Then that is more valuable, all of those thousands of long-tail keywords, than just showing up for your 2 or 3 big keywords. And it's a very powerful theory because I have found that some of the most successful campaigns occur by the site showing up really, really high for long-tail keywords rather than the big keywords, which I call the short tail. So that is an important part of this strategy because when you create content consistently, if you were to write a blog article every day, whatever the subject of that blog article is, you have the opportunity to have your website show up for that subject. Eventually, when you have hundreds of blog articles, each blog article could show up for, let's say, 10 or 12 different random long-tail searches. That could lead to thousands of searches coming to your website. And even if you're not immediately ranking for, that you're not at the top for the keyword sexual health or something like that, you're going to probably be in better shape because usually people that are more serious are typing more words into the search box. They found that for businesses, people that are more serious about making a purchase, and also people that are more serious about doing research are typing longer keyword phrases into the box. So you want to get the short tail. You want to get the big keywords. But the way this strategy works, it starts off with the long tail, the lesser searched keywords. And just to be clear, when I say long tail or short tail, they're not related to the length of the keyword. It sounds like it should be. Actually, that's a clever way of looking at it. But the long tail just refers to the thousands of searches that if you think of like a mouse's tail or something like that, it refers to really the analogy of like an animal's tail, where the long part is where all of the lesser search keywords are, and there's so much more of it, and then just sort of the base of the tail is where those couple of important keywords are. So just to be clear, the long tail does, just to remember it easier, refer to lots of longer phrases. But it is possible that a 3-word phrase could be a long tail phrase, just to be clear. So I want to give examples of content that works very well, because I can't just tell you create great content and get people to link to it, and you're going to get a lot of traffic and it's going to convert and that sort of thing. Let me show you what I mean. So this is a case study from a recycling company. It's a company that we worked with for many years. And recycling, unlike sex, is not particularly interesting to most people. We're talking about the average person. They think that, hopefully they think that recycling is important, because it is. But are they really going to want to spend time, let's say time on a social network, for instance, consuming content about recycling? No, it's not a sexy subject. So what we do is we try to take an angle on it that is truly interesting. So if this was our job, how do we make recycling sexy? And what we did is we took a different angle on recycling than usual. We created 3 different articles here, and we created dozens like this. But one of them was called "When Cars Are Repurposed as Furniture and Flower Beds." And it's all about people that have taken cars, and instead of putting those cars into the scrap heap, they have done something fun or interesting with them. So in the first picture, some really lucky 7-year-old kid got a car bed. And in the second picture, some probably strange human being created a flower bed out of their car. There's a bunch more pictures. I think there are probably 10 pictures here. Notice the pictures are very high quality. You may not be able to see it that well because I tried to squeeze in all these examples, but it's always really high quality, clear pictures. And they're interesting to look at. They're the type of things that you would probably want to if you were sitting next to someone, be like, oh, check this out. This is so interesting. So the important thing is that we know people found it interesting, because we got, I think, something like a dozen or 20, anywhere from 12 to 20, I forget where the exact number, links from other websites saying, you got to check this out, this is cool. And this brought a huge amount of credibility with Google. And just so you know the shorthand, Google credibility, Google trust, which is the currency of trust, the currency of Google, is called trust rank. That is the industry term that those of us in the industry use to refer to Google value. Now, links from other websites are so tied into Google value that trust rank is sometimes even referred to as link juice, because the links pass a kind of juice over to your website that makes it strong, makes it trusted, just to be clear. A second article here is designer furniture created from abandoned street signs. Again, clear pictures, really weird, kooky, interesting topic. And we are talking about recycling, but we're doing it in a popular interest way, and we're getting tons of links in the process. The third one is people who carve telephone books. So instead of throwing them out, they make art out of the telephone books. All of these got a lot of links. If you guys publish any article that gets as many links as any of these 3 articles got, you're really, really doing this strategy right. I want to give a different example for an animal shelter. We created this. It's called 15 Incredible Images of Animal Emotions. Now, granted, an animal shelter is one of the easiest nonprofits to get publicity for, because of how people feel about animals, because of the strong emotional connection we have with our animals. But if you look at these pictures, all that we did in this article was get really nice, clear pictures to represent different emotions. And it just became fascinating to look at. So the first one is love. These swans, I think they're swans. The second one is sadness with this lab. The third one, I believe, is happiness. And then the squirrel is curiosity. And then I forget if it's contentment or security with a sleeping little baby cutie pie over here. And then maybe fear is the kitten. So now, we didn't know that these animals are feeling these exact emotions. We don't know enough to know that. But we do know that it's interesting to people and that it's fun. And it got a ton of links. This is one of our more successful, in terms of links, articles that we put out. So you guys are all within the field of sexual health. There's probably a lot of interesting articles you can do. But there's really an art to that. If you have someone at your organization that is good, it's sort of like a combination of PR and just clever writing. Because you have to find an angle that's very interesting, and then you have to just know how to write in a way that is consumable to today's really kind of hyperactive internet audience when they're so used to getting as much content as quickly as they want to get. And I see a question here. The question is, does it matter whether the pages are coded in HTML or WordPress or Drupal or PHP? Well, the pages should have an HTML base. I recommend WordPress. Drupal is fine as well, but personally I find WordPress to be the most effective platform because it's the most SEO friendly. Like I feel like WordPress, people from WordPress have come over to Google and had lunch and they had a conversation about how the two of them could work together very well, and all WordPress platform websites would function well on Google, and they've done an excellent job of it. So I recommend WordPress above all platforms, although Drupal does an absolutely fine job as well. There's no reason if you're using it to change or anything like that. As for PHP, there can certainly be PHP on your page, but you want the page to just appear normally to search engines. Google can read most things as long as it's coded in a very clear way. So you'd have to almost go out of your way or be really sloppy to have Google not see your content or not be able to read it correctly or like it enough. So I've got one more case study of great content. And this is something that we did for a current client of us. Now this is not nonprofit, but I had to bring it in because it brings in a really, really important thing that I think a lot of you guys could take advantage of. So this is a medical practice. This is a client of ours who is a foot doctor. And what we decided to do, because again, we have to make all of these things sexy and interesting that are not necessarily sexy and interesting. In this case, it's foot medicine, healing feet. How do we make that a topic that other websites, that blogs are going to want to link to? And it doesn't have to be blogs. It can be any website, but usually a website is not going to want to just place a link on unless they feel very compelled to. So what we did is we thought a lot about this, and we decided that we were going to take what I call a micro-celebrity approach to content. Now the micro-celebrity thing I think could be very interesting to any nonprofit organization as a way of attracting attention. There are many people out there that are very accomplished for one reason or another and have an audience of people that really like and respect them. However, those people are not a huge celebrity. They're not like Brad Pitt or Angelina or whatever. They are just a celebrity within their niche. People like that often are really accomplished and enjoy giving interviews and receiving kind of the kudos for the great work they've done. So what we do is sometimes we do interview series for our clients, and we target people that have niche audiences. Often niche audiences, the kind of small cult kind of audiences, are the most passionate. Because if we decided to try to get an interview with Britney Spears or something like that, or Jay-Z, sure, there's a ton of people that like them, but they're so mainstream that you're not going to get the passion. So what we did here for this medical practice is we contacted marathon winners. Now, I'm not sure how many people that are here on this call can name anyone that won a marathon before, but if you think about what it takes to win a marathon, this is a truly accomplished person who's probably inspirational in some way. And it's a person that doesn't get that much recognition. So we simply sent out a lot of emails to anyone that we saw, we looked up online, had won a marathon, especially in the New York area. So the New York Marathon is one that we focused on. And we just sent an email, and the subject was interview request. Now when you send anyone an email that says interview request, they're going to open it because they want to know, what is this? Is it big? Is it small? Is it going to mean something cool for me? People are interested in me. I mean, it's a compelling thing to get an email with that subject. And we had this interview series on this foot doctor's website, and we interviewed these people that don't get enough recognition who have won marathons. Now, the thinking behind this is, A, they've got big niche communities. They're going to share a lot on social media and get people to look at this guy's interview. And it happens to be on a website that has a lot of calls to action that say, if you have a problem with your feet or you need foot-related services, podiatry services, then contact Dr. Geldwart. Now, the key to this audience that we chose is that anyone that is a marathon runner or a marathon winner is going to have foot problems. It's just pretty much a guarantee. The human body was not meant to run a marathon, at least not in today's day and age. So we have this built-in micro-audiences, fans of each of these marathon winners, and it may just be a couple dozen or it could be a couple hundred people, that probably a lot of them could use a foot doctor, as many of us could. And so we ended up getting so many patients for Dr. Geldwart, and we still do this, simply by this sort of micro-celebrity outreach approach. It's worked extremely well, and we've gotten a ton of links from the websites of each of these marathon winners as well. Each one usually maintains a blog or some sort of website, and they will link to it in the press section or in the updates and announcements section. So we end up getting a lot of links for our client that way as well. So it's actually worked out as a fairly clever strategy. So I think that's an important one to share. Now, when I talk about good content, I want to make it very clear that Google is aware of what is good content and what is bad content. They weren't always. For many, many years, they had no idea what was just content. They encouraged, put out articles, put out videos, but they didn't really know what was good and what was bad. Those days are now over, and for many SEO companies out there, this spelled the end of their company, because knowing the difference between good content and bad means that you have to put real effort into the content that you put out there. This is a screenshot of a client that was beginning to do great with our nuclear football approach until he got a little bit too clever and decided, well, if Evan's people can do it, then I can do it. And he hired, I think, people from overseas, paid them like $5 an article to write more articles. He saw his traffic rising quite a bit in the 3 months since we started the nuclear football and said, well, all they're doing is publishing an article every day. I can do that too. I'll just get people from India or Malaysia or wherever it was. The problem is Google could immediately see that the quality of that content was low, and it smacked them down in what's known as the Panda penalty. If any of you guys are familiar with SEO at all, you will have heard of the Panda penalty as one of the kind of big buzzwords that's going around the industry. Panda means that any site, the Panda penalty that Google imposed means that any website that is putting out crappy-ish content is not going to get that content indexed. Google will just turn around and not even look at it. And what I found very interesting was looking at their Google Analytics, this client. The day before compared to the day after, that's what this slide is. On the day before, the average visit was 1 minute 22 seconds. On the day after, it was 2 minutes 21 seconds. So the average time spent was a lot higher. Interesting. It actually looks like Google improved the content on the website by not indexing all of the bad content. The bounce rate went down, which is a good thing. And the number of keywords went in half. So instead of showing up for 692 keywords, which they were at that point because Google was counting a lot of their crappy articles, they were showing up for less keywords, but people were liking what they found a lot more, staying longer, and they were more hesitant to leave. So Google's Panda penalty is actually just a way of improving the content on the web. So that is just my little word of caution to say that Google has gotten good at their job of knowing what to index, what to actually include in their search results. And you cannot just sort of cheat and put out a 500-word article with no pictures that is boring, that is copied from a press release. That is no way to put out content. There has to be real human effort in it. So now I want to go on to links, press, and social sharing, which is the other pillar of the equation. But before I do, I see a question. And the question is, how does Google know or judge content as good? Well, I wouldn't be honest if I told you I know exactly how Google does that. But I think the important thing is that they get it. I think some of the things they look for, maybe this is a way to answer your question, is they look at content that A, doesn't look like it has been paraphrased from some other article that was published in the past. I believe they can detect closely paraphrased content. They look at things that have no pictures. They look at when content is published very frequently and doesn't have links. because I think they can rightly say that if you publish content constantly and nobody ever pays attention to it by linking to it, or no one ever recognizes it by linking to it, it's probably not very good. So to be honest, you could probably post content that's not that good if you have a ton of links, because then you're just really trusted by Google and they'll say, not sure what they're doing, but I guess it's fine because a lot of people are linking to it. So they look for, the sites that they penalize typically will not have a lot of links, although in the case of my client, he did have a good amount of links. Typically, they will be repurposed kind of content. I mean, duplicating content from another website is never okay. Sometimes that'll be the case. Other times it'll be paraphrasing. There won't be a lot of pictures. There'll be spelling errors sometimes. It's things like that that Google looks for. So good. I'm glad that was helpful. So I'm going to move on to the second half of the equation. Hopefully I've explained to you a little bit about what is good content, and I hope that your brains are kind of abuzz with ideas of what kind of good content you can do that's related to your nonprofit. Now, getting links is a totally separate art, and it is really the essence of SEO. SEO without links is a ridiculous concept. It is truly, almost the definition of SEO is how do you get a lot of links, because that's what causes you to pop up high. And I see a question from David. It says, does Google penalize repetitive content? Repetitive content. Trying to think what that means exactly. If you mean duplicate content, meaning content that you take from another website and publish on your own, if you do it a little bit in a really legitimate way, they're not going to penalize you. So let's say you're just, you got an article in the press published about your nonprofit, and you're just copying the article onto your site to show people what the article said. That's going to be okay. If you are wholesale copying content and trying to use it as your own, Google will be able to tell. And by the way, the general rule for staying in Google's good graces is, and this, I just made this up, but I really feel it works well. Visualize there is a Google spam engineer sitting next to you at your desk. And then ask him that question or her that question. Would this be okay? If it seems like you're doing something really legitimate, it's going to be okay. Google has really gotten good at this. They've paid a lot of smart people a lot of money for many years to make sure that they know the difference between good content and bad content. If you think the Google engineer would say, would people really like that? Is that really helpful? I think you're trying to fool Google into liking you more than they should. Then you shouldn't do it. So that's kind of a litmus test that I like to use is, would a Google engineer have a problem with it? And then David is clarifying this question. If you use the same, when he talks about repetitive content, he's saying content that is the same across the site except it's reworded. I wouldn't really do that. I wouldn't think that's a great idea. If you did that with a few pages, that's fine. But occasionally you see websites that basically create like 100 landing pages, one for every city or town that matters to them. And they'll basically create the same landing page, except there'll just be a different name of a town within it. That is not a good practice. You want to have original content about each city or town or each topic on each landing page. So although you do get away with it a lot, I don't know if I'd be really freaked out if you do that currently, if Google is not currently, if you're not being penalized. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but it's not a good practice. So I hope that answers it, David. So links, press, and social sharing. How do you get links? Well, I'm a fan of what I call the systematic approach. And what that means is send out 10 letters a day, every day. Send out 5 letters a day, every day. Have some sort of goal and make sure that you achieve it every day. Now, the trick to that one is that you have to actually put real thought and time and effort into each letter. It doesn't have to be a long letter, but I'm going to show you in 2 slides what a letter would look like that you would send out in order to request that that website link to you, because there's a particular way that you should do it. But if you make it your business to share what you're doing, maybe it's content you wrote, maybe it's the overall mission of your nonprofit, with a member of the press or any other website each day a few times, you're going to get ahead with Google. This is successful behavior, systematically reaching out. Because maybe you write to 5 people and maybe 4 of them don't write back or it's not a good fit for them. But if one of them writes back, that's fantastic. It doesn't matter your batting average. It matters the number of links you're able to obtain. If you actually wrote 5 letters a day and got a link every day, because 1 in 5 actually linked back to your website, and you got 5 links a week, you'd be one of the more successful search engine optimizing nonprofits that I've ever seen. So again, it's all possible. It's a matter of the amount of effort that you put in. And by the way, I don't take for granted that I'm giving advice that sounds like it could be very difficult to implement, because who's got the time to be writing content, to be asking for links. But I'm telling you what I think is feasible in a realistic world to do. It's not feasible to immediately start doing all these things. It's not like you have people on hand that can immediately do it necessarily, but you may. You may have someone in your organization who's in charge of press, who's in charge of writing, and this is just one of the most valuable things they can do, because it pays tremendous dividends to be in Google's good graces. So another way that I like to get links is to get in touch with category experts, people that are experts in this case, sexual health. So not to encourage you to beleaguer Deb, but it would be a great idea to write a letter to an email to someone like Deb and say, hey, we're doing something cool. Would you mind sharing it? Either on your website, or you could just get exposure by sharing on ISIS, Twitter, or something like that. So if it is applicable to what Deb is doing at the moment, that is the type of thing that would be a good idea. What I like to use is a site called Topsy.com. Not sure how many people have heard of Topsy, but this is what it looks like. You can do what's known as an expert search. You would type in nonprofits, and then it tells you who the most popular people, mostly on Twitter, are to do with nonprofits. And it's always a good idea to write to these people, since they have big audiences, and because the links on their websites are worth a lot to Google, because there's a lot of attention around those websites. That's a great way to get in touch with people who could publicize what you're doing, is Topsy. I want to, because we've been going a little bit slower because there's been just a lot of great questions and everything, I want to make sure we get to the CCAS website, the case study. So I'm going to get to that in about 2 minutes, because that's really, really important. But for anyone that's able to stay beyond the hour, I just want to make sure I finish the presentation, because there's a lot of good nuggets in here. So the basics of getting a lot of links, again, asking people you know, asking friends of yours in the nonprofit world, or people that are outside the nonprofit world, to link back to your website. Any way you can get a link on a resource page, on a sort of like friends section, friends and partners section of a website, or on a blog roll on a blog, every link counts. Here's an example of an email that we would send out on behalf of the recycling company in this case. And just so you can see the way that we approach asking for a link. Now keep in mind, we never use the word link. We're never going to say, hey, can you place a link? Because everyone's going to ignore you. That's like an SEO spammer thing to do. And we all know how much SEO spam there is going on out there. So what we do is we try to make an emotional connection. We try to relate to them. And above all, we try to acknowledge the fact that there is a human being on the other side of this email. And sure, you've got an agenda. That's very clear. That's why you're writing the email in the first place. But they have an agenda as well. How can your request fit into their agenda? And so it's very important. In this case, we're just saying that we relate to this person. We run a complimentary website. We would absolutely love it if they would consider sharing with their audience what we are doing on our website. And we use the word sharing with our audience, not linking, because people do not like it when you're asking a targeted thing. It feels too much like you're trying to control their website. Also, it's really important to pay people a compliment. It's a bit of a cheap thing to say, but people love a compliment. So if you can reference something specifically on their site, they'll often be in a better mood to want to share what you're doing. Kind of common knowledge type of thing, but I think it's important to share.